Finally learned how to work it. I have no agenda. I know there are lots of people who will tell you that, and then they lay their agenda on you, but I actually don't have one. Other than just to make myself available, you can ask questions about, me or the church or, a good recipe for carrot cake. I don't know, whatever. But it's wonderful to be here. It's been a very long time since I've been here. Although I have confirmed a few young people from here at the cathedral, helping Bishop Mary Ann, because I saw my name in your book this morning when I was signing for all of these kids. What a great confirmation class! They were really fun. Anybody got a question? Yes, ma'am. Okay, especially come to the microphone for a thank you.
I just wanted to thank you for your excellent sermon to us, to the confirmands, and I really appreciated I guess it was supposed to be the basics, some basic tenets, but that flexibility and that openness for a lot of us is wonderful to hear, and I really, really thank you, and I hope it will be available in print, because I have some young people in mind.
So let me just say something in response to that. Some of what I said and how I said it came out of my own story. I actually grew up in the Disciples of Christ denomination. There are not a lot of Disciples churches in the East because the Disciples denomination grew out of one of the so-called Great Awakenings when Kentucky and Ohio were the frontier. I'm from Kentucky. And so the denomination was started and moved westward, but never really made much of a U-turn to come back east. They figured you all were lost anyway. Although downtown in Thomas Circle is First National City Church, I think is that right? And it's a disciples' church, and it's where Lyndon and Lady Bird Johnson worshipped when they were here. Nationally, it's quite a liberal and open, wonderful denomination. I grew up in a very small, very poor congregation. Every single man and woman in that parish were tobacco sharecroppers, except for one lawyer. And I grew up, my parents were sharecroppers. I didn't live in a house with running water till I was 10. And but this was a very conservative congregation. And what I said was really true. I was kind of thinking theologically early on, and I had an advanced placement English course with a teacher who got me to reading Paul Tillich in high school, which was just such a breath of fresh air. So I was really. I was very turned off by the narrowness that I experienced in that congregation, and so I had a lot of questions, and was told that there are certain questions you shouldn't ask. And as I said this morning, even at the ripe old age of 17, I didn't think that was true. I figured there were questions that didn't have easy or brief answers, but I didn't think there was, if the faith couldn't stand up to my questions as a 17-year-old, then, it's kind of sad. So by the time I went off to college, I was looking for something else. I'd never been in an Episcopal church in my life, but I happened to go to Sewanee, the University of the South in Tennessee, which is actually owned by the Southern Dioceses of the Episcopal Church. It has a terrible reason for existing, which is slave-owning plantation owners got sick and tired of sending their eldest sons to Oxford for their education, and a group of them went to Oxford and basically bought a faculty and talked enough people into coming with them. They shipped them all back to a mountain in Tennessee. It's still quite isolated, and founding the University of the South. Mercifully, it has gotten beyond those particular days, but that part of its history is not anything to be proud of. But I ran into an assistant chaplain there, and I was still on my rant about, God sending all these people to hell and stuff. And instead of telling me there were questions that I was not supposed to ask, instead he said to me, "Gee, those are great questions. I'm not sure I know the answers, but why don't you come on in and we'll look for answers together?" And I thought, okay, I like the sound of this. And he was the one, when I was saying, that Nicene Creed thing, wow, it's got a lot of stuff in it that I just don't buy. And he said, well, just drop out when you get to a particular part that you don't believe. And what it did was that it just gave me the freedom to be whoever and wherever I was, and still go to church. I think sometimes we get so rigid about some of those things that people just give up on us altogether. And what that allowed me to do was to continue to come to church, participate as much as I could, which, of course, the more I came, the more I participated, the more I understood, the more I learned, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not a bad approach for adults. It's just that we're sometimes... we think we won't get permission, or somehow that's being sacrilegious or whatever. I don't think we're supposed to know everything, and it's okay to be a part of this community without knowing everything, because in actuality, none of us do know everything. So anyway, so that sort of approach, thank you for your compliment, that sort of approach comes out of my experience of that. Yeah. And I still think there are questions we can't answer, right? Uh-oh. Hi. There's trouble.
Thanks for coming. Good to see you. Barna, the public opinion research group that most of its clients are evangelical Christians.
Yeah.
Went to 18 to 25-year-old Americans and asked them for the words that they associate with Christian and Christianity. And 8 out of the 10 words were negative words.
Sure.
Judgmental, anti-gay, racist, harsh. They were just awful.
Yep.
The churches that might wheel on their heels and say to America, hey, but we don't do that. We're the guys who don't do that. They're having the same downdraft among young people as the churches that very much do.
Right.
So what are we supposed to do?
Yeah. Good. Like I said, there are some questions that just don't have answers. So these are great questions, and first of all, it doesn't do any church any good to pretend that those statistics are not true, right? To somehow brush them off, as opposed to paying attention to them and asking the question, why is that the case? A couple of things before I answer it. It was not too very long ago that those of us whose numbers were diminishing were always had thrown in our faces the more conservative evangelical churches' rapid growth. That is no longer true. And the number one reason is their denomination's stand on LGBTQ people. And here's why that's happening, is that they know LGBTQ people. Back not too long ago, most Americans would have told you they didn't know anyone gay. Now, is there a family left that doesn't know one of their own to be LGBTQ? But they don't appreciate the things that are being said and how they're being treated because they're friends with those people and consider themselves allies. So that's the number one reason they give for leaving. And the conservative churches at the moment are literally in a panic about what to do because all the kids are leaving. And what does the future look like without kids? To get to your question, it may sound like a weak answer, and I'm willing to entertain the notion that it is. But my thought about that is, I think we just have to keep doing what we're doing, and hold on for a little while. And I think we need to catch up in terms of social media and it sounds a little crass to say marketing, but look, if you're not into marketing, you don't get heard these days. And we put precious little money into it. And so there's no, if we don't have a presence on TikTok and Instagram and so on and so forth, no one's going to stumble into us. You should know that, being here in the middle of a residential area, nobody's just going to happen in here, right? So you might have some clues about how to get known. But here's the thing. I'll tell you what I think we could do about this. And I'll give you a really good example, which is you may not be able to get kids or adults to come and listen to, boring sermons about the Nicene Creed or whatever, but you can get them to work on a social action project. You can get them to work on behalf of some vulnerable population somewhere, or work at a shelter for transgender women of color, or just name one of those. My parish, St. Thomas DuPont Circle, when the governor of Texas puts migrants on a bus and sends them to Washington, D.C., they unload at my parish. And our parish has become a team of people to welcome them, receive them, give them what they need, which is they need somebody to watch their kids and a good shower, because they haven't had access to a shower in days. So my rector sent me so we built a new church not too long ago. You should come and see it. It's totally cool. And on the first floor, they put in Bishop Gene Robinson Chapel. And I said, don't you have to be dead to do that? And they were like, no, we can do it in your honor, not in your memory. So I'm like, okay. I got that. But she sent me a picture that I treasure, which is, it actually has chairs in it, but there were no chairs in it that day because there were immigrants just sleeping everywhere. It's not very big, but the whole floor was just covered. Some of those people have walked from Venezuela, right? And so on. We have adults and young people banging down our doors to help. And we get 5 to 6 newcomers every week. Every week. It is astounding. We now have simultaneous translation equipment for every person in the congregation. So whether we do the service in English or Spanish, everybody can understand it. And it has transformed us. It's literally transformed us. And the stories of these, one of my favorite theologians teaches at Iliff Seminary in Denver. One of my favorite theologians, whose name I'm completely blocking at the moment. It will come to me. Anyway, one of the things he's learned, if he were preaching that sermon, is that salvation always comes from the margins, right? It's always people on the edge of things who have the most to teach us, especially folks like us here, right? And people are hungry for that. And it's substantive. Coming to church and learning the colors of the liturgical calendar, okay, I guess it's, relatively important. It's nice when everybody wears red or green or whatever. But honestly, that is not going to draw anybody, right? And it's certainly, kids are not going to put up with it. So let me just say one more thing, which is I think the reason it's being experienced across the board, all kinds of churches, and also some synagogues and mosques and so on, is that I don't know the statistics on this, but surely people's trust in institutions of all kinds is at an all-time low, right? To my way of thinking, and given my age, which is 76, I think it started with Watergate. It was our first dramatic experience of, perhaps, of being told one thing and having another altogether going on, to be lied to, and the Vietnam War at the same time. And certainly, if you've read anything about the Vietnam War since then, you know that what we were getting was not actually what was happening. So I think all of us have learned to distrust institutions somewhat. I think it's especially so with younger people. So here's the caution I would give. If we don't realize that our democracy is under attack and under the greatest threat of my lifetime, then well, I was going to say we ought to lose it, but that's too awful to contemplate. We need to notice what is happening, and we may be called upon to do some brave things. And here's why I believe in democracy, and here's a message that I think would draw people. We believe in democracy. And I don't believe in taking the church and plopping it in the public square and making everybody salute it or pray to it or whatever. But my faith makes me want to go into the public square and fight for democracy. Why? Because, well, we say we believe loving God and loving our neighbor as ourselves. There is no form of government that tries to do the greatest good for the greatest number more than democracy. And so you and I have a religious reason to get involved in that, because it actually is the form of government. It is so not perfect, I don't even have to say that, except to let you know that I'm not naive or stupid. It's not perfect. But of all of our seeming choices about governing, that seems to work for the greatest good for the greatest number. And therefore, I think you and I, as Episcopalians, as Christians, have a duty to fight for it. And we are the people who need to stand up to the white Christian nationalism that is rampant, and it is snake oil. It does not deliver what it promises. And if we aren't careful, we're going to wake up in a country that we don't recognize. And that is not going to be working for the greatest good for the greatest number. I mean, we already don't do that sometimes, but I think we're reaching a dangerous tipping point. I think young people, I think unchurched people, I think de-churched people, there are a lot of those who used to be a part of a faith community and for whatever reason left, but I think part of the reason is that the places they weren't terribly relevant to what was going on in their lives. And so I think the most relevant thing at the moment is the precarious location, shall we say, of democracy in this country. So that's the best I can do, Ray. Yes, sir. Yeah, just come right on up.
You got one behind you, so I'm going to...
Yes, ma'am.
I have an idea.
I'll repeat it.
My idea is, you know how you say love your neighbor as yourself? What about loving your enemy?
Yeah, good point. This lady should be preaching. She said, well, never mind loving your neighbor, there's nothing wrong with that, but how about loving your enemy? That's sort of Christianity 2.0, right? And interestingly, even in Scripture, there is a progression, right? From loving God to learning to love yourself to loving your neighbor, and Jesus, of course, took that one step further about loving one's enemy. I think, well, you don't have to look too far for enemies, right? And I think sometimes it's hard to know how to love them. Let me just give you an example of something sort of personal, but when I was elected, you may have heard about it, and it caused a considerable amount of controversy, and people often say to me, how could you be so nice to and about your detractors? And a couple of things. One is the Archbishop of Kenya said that when Gene Robinson was made a bishop, Satan entered the church. The Bishop of Nigeria said that gay people are lower than the dogs. And I used to enjoy saying, because I actually believe it, that I'm going to be in heaven with those two guys. I believe that. And we're going to get along there because God won't have it any other way. I suspect we're going to discover that all three of us were wrong about some things and right about some things. And what helped me stay, on a good day, stay kind to them and helped me respect the dignity of every human being in them was to remind myself that they were only saying what we taught them. They weren't born with those opinions. They were taught that. And it's hard to blame someone for believing something that you taught them. And if we've been changing our minds, how good have we been at letting some people know? But here's what it did for me. Remembering that helped me not take it personally, right? And because I know that God loves me beyond anything I can imagine, and nobody can take that away from me, because of that knowledge, I can afford to be a wee bit gracious. And I think maybe part of the answer in terms of loving your neighbor is to remember to be a wee bit gracious. It means that you have a certain confidence in your love of God and love of self and love of neighbor, and you just might be able to love your enemies as well. I don't know. There we go.
As a fellow Southern who was raised in a conservative Southern Baptist household.
God love you. and God does, by the way.
I appreciate what you said about asking questions and being a pain in the rear, because that's what I was.
Yeah.
My question for you talked about how we address the younger generation, get them back into the faith community. What about my parents and the people, my ancestors? How do we change their hearts and minds? Like, that's something that I really struggle with.
Yeah.
My parents love me. They accept my partner, who happens to be African American. So there's that whole other issue. I know I went all in.
I was going to say, right.
But how do I go about changing? Because we have conversations,
yeah,
but they get heated.
Yeah.
And then how do we go about changing those hearts and minds and doing that?
Okay, I have a theory about that.
Okay.
It's more of a strategy probably than a theory, which is stop trying to change them. That's number one. Nobody likes to be approached by somebody who wants to change them. So right off the bat, you're in trouble. Second of all, you won't be successful. But I'll tell you what can be success, is the most likely to be successful, which is day after day, year after year, keep telling your story. Because if you stick with I statements, then people might not like it, but they can't argue with you about it. They can't argue what you think and feel, argue with it, because it's your life, and it's where your experiences have taken you. So it's so old and true and worn that it's kind of a cliche at this point, but working from I statements allows the other person the freedom to take as much as they want, reject as much as they want, do whatever with it. I think we need to stop feeling responsible for changing someone's mind and just be super responsible about telling our story. And the kind of story that will, I think, change more hearts is tell them how your heart changed. What experiences did you have that made you change your mind about LGBTQ people, about people of color, about people in wheelchairs, about migrants, fill in the blank. And what you do when you tell your story about, this is, for those of us who are alcoholics, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we know about that, right? You know, we're told to talk about how it was, and how and why we changed, and how it is now. It's a great pattern. So if you can say, I used to hate X, Y, and Z too, then this happened to me, and it made me feel this way, and now I feel and think this because of it. And then stop. Don't do what we all want to do, which is then tell them what to do or not to do or whatever. So stop and give them the compliment of the freedom to do with it or not as they see fit. You never know when you might be the straw that breaks that camel's back. Or with your parents, you may be the last person in the world to provide them with the last straw. I mean, you'd think it'd be different, right? And they're part of the way there. They still love you. They just don't know how all the time anymore. And so I think you have to hold the person you're dealing with in very high regard, and say, I'm just going to tell you where I am and how I got here. That's really all I can do. If you think about it, it's the same for evangelism, religious Christian evangelism. You try to hit somebody over the head with the gospel, and they will either run or resist like crazy. What you can do is say, here's what happened to me that makes me a believer, and this is how my life is better because of it. You know, if you want to look into it, great. I think, you might. It might do for you what it did for me. And you've provided them with a pattern of how change happens, like how it really happens to people. And so whether you're talking about some kind of social issue or, or even religion, I think it's probably the most effective way. The most effective way to change someone's mind is to stop trying to change their mind and just become a witness to what you believe is true in your own life. That you can take responsibility for, and nobody can take that away from you. You've learned what you've learned from that. And then if that actually helps someone open up, then thanks be to God. Okay. I have to have a bathroom break before we go to the next service. So I'm going to thank you all for staying and for this invitation to come, and I love being here. Thank you very much.